Hi friends, again. Remember last week I was showing you a bunch of pictures of eggs and we were talking about things that hatch out of eggs. And we're going to keep on talking about that a little bit more. I think a lot of you have read this book. This is called The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Actually, I don't have the book at my house to read to you, but I think you know the book. It's sort of about an egg. At the beginning of the book, a little egg hatched on a leaf and out popped a caterpillar, and the caterpillar ate and got bigger, as you see. And then he went into his cocoon, or you could call it a chrysalis, and after a little while he came out and he was a butterfly. Well, I want to talk about that. Butterflies, caterpillars, eggs. So let's look at this. This is a picture of the life cycle of a butterfly. Life cycle. A cycle is something that goes round and round. So look at these arrows. It goes around, keeps going around, never stops, around and around. Listen to that word cycle, like my unicycle, and the wheel goes around and around. Okay, so let's see what the life cycle, this is the life of a butterfly. It goes round and round. It starts with a grown-up butterfly. The girl, a female, lays her eggs. Now, the eggs would never be this big. They just made them big for the picture. Little bitty eggs, she lays them on a leaf. And when the egg hatches, out comes a caterpillar. You could also call it a larva. And it starts eating and growing. The caterpillar grows by eating leaves, and when it gets big enough, the caterpillar attaches to a plant and forms a protective shell all the way around it, called a chrysalis. A lot of people say cocoon. Either way, chrysalis, cocoon. So then a few weeks go by, like maybe 2 weeks, and it chews its way out, and it's a butterfly. And then it's grown up enough to lay eggs, and another caterpillar which grows and goes into its chrysalis, and another grown up, and more eggs, and around and around and around, and we always have butterflies. That's a cycle, the life cycle. Now, other creatures also have these life cycles. You might not know quite as much about the life cycle of frogs. I think maybe this is a little too shiny. Can you see it all right? The life cycle of frogs. So we got arrows again. See the arrows going around and around and around? Never stopping. There's no place that it ends. So this is the grown-up frog. And let's say it's a female, the mother frog. In the pond, she lays hundreds of eggs, and they're protected by this jelly stuff. We saw a better picture of this last week. And they float in the pond until the tadpoles are ready to hatch. These are the tadpoles. They sort of look like fish. And they do breathe through gills. They can breathe under the water just like fish do. So they swim around and they're growing. After a few weeks, notice that it's getting legs. And it's getting bigger, fatter, and the tail part is getting shorter. The body part's getting bigger and the tail's getting shorter, and these legs are coming. It's still really a tadpole. Some people call this a pollywog. You might hear that word. It keeps on growing, and look, this really looks a lot like a frog. It's gotten bigger, the legs are much more developed, and the tail is getting smaller and smaller, and we call this a froglet. I'll tell you what it says here. The tadpole's gills, for breathing, begin to shrink, and it starts to breathe air. Like grown-up frogs come up out of the water to breathe, take a breath, like we do when we're swimming. The tail is almost gone, and it grows front legs. Notice here we only have back legs. Teeny little. Oh, these are actually the gills here. Those are not the legs. So this is when it gets front legs, a froglet. Keeps on growing. When the tail is completely gone and the gills are completely gone, it's a frog. So it's a cycle. It goes round and round. Frog lays some eggs. Tadpole. Getting bigger, growing legs. You could call it a pollywog. Froglet. The gills are shrinking. It's beginning to be able to breathe air. Look how little the tail. Frog. Eggs, tadpole, growing, frog, around and around, the life cycle. Now, this is very interesting, and I would like to see you make a little project about it. I made one to show you. A little book that tells exactly all of this. It's called Fabulous Frogs, The Life Cycle of a Frog by Miss Gail. And I did my coloring, and you should do a nice job coloring, because after you make this book, it would be nice to show it to your sister, your brother. You could go on FaceTime and show your grandparents. Anybody who doesn't know so much about frogs or who would like to see your good work. So, see this rectangle thing here? That you're going to have to cut pictures out and glue them in the right place. So the first thing that happens is the frog lays eggs in the water. So I glued my eggs on there. Here's the frog. Laid his eggs and jumped out. Her eggs. Then I cut out the tadpole. Here's the little egg, and the tadpole's coming out. A tadpole hatches from an egg. You can practice your reading. A tadpole hatches from an egg. The tadpole grows legs. It will soon be a froglet. The froglet's tail gets smaller. Now it is a frog. And look, here's what we're talking about, the life cycle. Eggs, tadpole, tadpole with legs, froglet, frog, around and around. You could make this exact book with cutting and coloring and gluing. Maybe you could send me a picture.